Hey everyone, welcome back to Infidelity Scandals channel. For those who are new here, we share real stories about relationships, the good, the bad, and sometimes the truly heartbreaking like mine. This story is the hardest one I've ever had to tell. I never thought I'd be sitting here talking about how I betrayed someone I cared about, but that's exactly what happened. I'm not here to make excuses or paint myself as the victim. I made choices. Terrible choices that hurt people who didn't deserve it. I'm sharing this because maybe it'll help someone else recognize when they're heading down a similar path. By the time I finish telling you what happened at my wedding reception and everything that led up to it, you'll see how easily a simple connection can turn into something that destroys multiple lives. You'll understand how secrets eat away at you from the inside until there's nothing left but the shell of who you used to be. This isn't a story about finding true love. It's about the mess we make when we try to have it all, and the price everyone pays for our selfishness. So let me tell you about us, me, my husband Taylor, and his cousin Collins. When this all started, I was 28, working my way up in marketing. Always on my laptop, always taking calls, always chasing that next promotion. Taylor was 30, a resident at the local hospital. He was everything I thought I wanted: smart, stable, kind. The guy who'd remember my mom's birthday, when even I forgot. The one who'd make sure there was food in the fridge when I worked late. Then there was Collins, Taylor's cousin. He was 29, a photographer, with this way of seeing the world that just pulled me in. They grew up close, more like brothers really. Collins was always at family gatherings, always part of our lives. Taylor and I met in college. We were together for 6 years before we got engaged. From the outside, we looked perfect. College sweethearts who supported each other's ambitions. But somewhere along the way, as his medical career took off and my marketing job consumed me, we started living parallel lives instead of shared ones. We'd text each other goodnight more often than we'd actually fall asleep together. Date nights turned into quick dinners where we'd both check our phones every 5 minutes. We were drifting, but neither of us wanted to admit it. So instead, we decided to get married. Like somehow a wedding would fix what was broken between us. Like a ring and a piece of paper would bring back what was missing. I first met Collins at Taylor's parents' house, about 2 years before the wedding. Taylor got called into the hospital for an emergency, so I was stuck at this family barbecue alone. Collins was the one who noticed me standing awkwardly by the cooler and came over. We talked for hours that day, about books, travel, photography, all the things Taylor and I used to talk about before residency took over his life. Looking back now, I should have seen the warning signs. How my heart would beat a little faster when Taylor mentioned Collins would be at a family event. How I'd check my phone constantly after sending him a text. How I'd bring up his name in conversations just to talk about him. Hey babe, Collins recommended this restaurant downtown. We should try it sometime. Collins sent me this article about that marketing campaign I was telling you about. I told myself it was just nice to have someone who actually had time to talk. Someone who remembered the things I said. It wasn't wrong to have a friend, right? That's what I kept telling myself anyway. It started so innocently. That's what I keep telling myself, but maybe that's just what people say to make themselves feel better about crossing lines they knew they shouldn't cross. I ran into Collins at this little coffee shop downtown. I was working remotely that day, and Taylor was on his third straight 24-hour rotation at the hospital. Collins spotted me before I saw him. He came over with that easy smile of his and asked if he could join me. Taylor's been at the hospital for almost 3 days straight, I remember telling him. Sometimes I wonder if I'm in a relationship with his pager instead of him. Collins laughed, but then his face got serious. He's lucky to have someone who understands his passion. Not everyone would be so patient. The way he looked at me when he said it, like he actually saw me, not just the supportive girlfriend role I was playing. It made me feel visible again. We started meeting for coffee regularly after that. Just as friends, I told myself. I'd tell Taylor about it sometimes, casually mention running into Collins. Other times I wouldn't bring it up. Those little omissions, they were the first cracks in the foundation. Our conversations grew deeper. I found myself telling Collins things I used to tell Taylor before he became too tired or too busy to listen. Dreams about traveling, frustrations about work, doubts about the future. "I miss this," I admitted one day. "Just talking, really talking." "Taylor's a good guy," Collins said. "He just gets caught up in saving lives." I know, and that makes me feel awful for wanting more of his attention. How selfish is that, right? Being jealous of dying people? Collins reached across the table and took my hand. Just for a second, but that touch, it was electric. We both pulled away quickly, but something had shifted. Our anniversary came around, 6 years together. Taylor had promised to take the night off. I got dressed up, made reservations at this fancy restaurant downtown. 20 minutes before we were supposed to leave, he called. "Emergency surgery. Patient came in critical. I'm so sorry, Susan." I sat in our apartment, all dressed up with nowhere to go. I didn't even think about what I was doing when I texted Collins. "Free for dinner?" Taylor got called in again. He picked me up 30 minutes later. We went to the restaurant Taylor and I had reservations for, drank expensive wine, laughed about things that weren't even that funny. It felt good to be seen, to be heard. When he dropped me off at my apartment, there was this moment, this pause as we said goodnight. Neither of us moved at first, then suddenly we were kissing. It wasn't planned. At least that's what I told myself afterward. I pulled away first. "We can't." "Taylor!" "I know," Collins said. "I'm sorry." But we weren't sorry, not really. Because 3 days later, we met for coffee again. And this time, coffee turned into a walk, which turned into dinner, which turned into another kiss. And another. "Just once," we kept saying. "This is the last time." But it never was. Soon I was living 2 completely different lives. There was the Susan who was planning a wedding with Taylor, who smiled and nodded when his mother talked about grandchildren, who patiently waited for him to come home from long shifts. And then there was the Susan who met Collins during lunch breaks, who texted him constantly, who felt more alive than she had in years. I became an expert at lying, work events that never happened, girls' nights with friends I barely spoke to anymore. I had an explanation for everything. "Your phone's always going off lately," Taylor said once. Not suspicious, just noticing. "Work stuff," I said easily. "This new campaign is killing me." He nodded, kissed my forehead, and went back to studying medical journals. He trusted me completely. That should have made me feel worse than it did. 8 months into my affair with Collins, Taylor proposed. We just had dinner at home, one of those rare nights when he was actually off work. He seemed nervous all evening, checking his phone more than usual. I assumed he was waiting for the hospital to call him in. Instead, he pulled out a small velvet box after dessert. "Susan," he said, kneeling beside me. "I know I haven't been the most present boyfriend lately, but I want to be a better partner to you, and I want us to build a life together. Will you marry me?" I stared at the ring, princess cut, white gold band, exactly what I had mentioned wanting years ago when we passed a jewelry store window. He had remembered. All this time, while I was slipping away, he had been planning this. I said yes through tears that Taylor thought were joy, but were actually a confusing mix of guilt, panic, and a desperate hope that maybe this could fix everything, that a ring would somehow make me stop wanting Collins. "I love you," I told Taylor, and in that moment, I meant it. I did love him, the safety of him, the history between us, the life we had planned. I texted Collins later that night. "We need to talk." We met at our usual coffee shop the next day. I showed him the ring before saying anything. "So he finally did it," Collins said, his voice flat. "I said yes," I told him. "Of course you did." He didn't look surprised, just sad. This is probably for the best. We both knew this couldn't go anywhere. "I think we need to end this," I said, the words scraping my throat. "I want to make my marriage work." Collins nodded, reached across the table like he might take my hand, then pulled back. "If that's what you want." "It's what I need to do," I said, which wasn't quite the same thing. We said goodbye that day. I deleted his number from my phone, removed our text history. I was going to be a good fiancée, a faithful wife. That lasted exactly 3 weeks. It was late, past midnight. Taylor was on call again. I was looking through wedding venues online when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I recognized despite having deleted it. "I miss you." Just those 3 words. I stared at my phone for 20 minutes before replying, "I miss you too." The next day, we were back in each other's arms. The guilt was heavier now, the stakes higher, but somehow that just made everything more intense. "We'll end it before the wedding," we promised each other. This is just us saying goodbye slowly. Wedding planning continued. I picked out flowers with Taylor's mother, who kept telling me how lucky Taylor was to have found such a devoted partner. My sister helped me choose a dress, narrowing her eyes whenever I checked my phone, and Colin's text came through. "You seem distracted," she said once. "Cold feet?" "Just work stress," I lied. I was always lying now. Weeks turned into months. The wedding was now just 2 months away. Then 1 month. Collins and I kept saying each goodbye was the last one, but we never meant it. "What are we doing?" he asked me once, as we lay in his apartment. "Are you really going to marry him?" "I have to," I said. "You don't have to do anything," Collins said. "We could just tell him, deal with the fallout, be together properly." But I couldn't imagine the look on Taylor's face if we told him. Couldn't bear the thought of his family, who had become my family, knowing what I'd done. Couldn't face the judgment, the whispers, the dramatic soap opera my life would become. "After everything he's done for me, I can't hurt him like that," I said. "So instead you'll marry him while in love with someone else?" Collins asked. "How is that better?" I didn't have an answer. 2 weeks before the wedding, Collins told me he wasn't coming. "I can't sit there and watch you marry him, Susan. I'm not that strong." Panic seized me. Somehow his absence seemed worse than his presence, like I was losing him completely. "Please," I begged. "I need you there. I need." I stopped myself. What did I need? What was I asking for? "I'll be there," he finally said. "But this has to end, for real this time." I agreed. We said goodbye again. Our final goodbye, we said, like we'd said a dozen times before. The morning of my wedding day arrived with perfect weather, sunny, not too hot, the kind of day wedding planners pray for. Everyone around me was buzzing with excitement while I felt like I was walking underwater. My mom and sister were helping me get ready, chattering about the decorations, the cake, how handsome Taylor would look in his tuxedo. "You're so quiet," my sister said as she helped pin my veil. "Not getting cold feet, are you?" I forced a smile. Just taking it all in. The truth was, I'd barely slept. Collins and I hadn't spoken in 5 days, our longest stretch of silence since the affair began. I kept checking my phone, both dreading and hoping for a message from him. It came as my makeup artist was finishing my face. "I'll be there, sitting in the back. I'm sorry about what I said before." My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped my phone. My sister noticed. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said automatically. "Just Taylor checking in." Another lie to add to the pile. The drive to the church was a blur. My dad kept squeezing my hand, telling me how proud he was, how happy Taylor made me. I nodded and smiled and felt like the worst person alive. When the church doors opened and the music started, I clutched my dad's arm like I was drowning. The aisle seemed a mile long. I saw Taylor first, standing at the altar, his face lighting up as he saw me. He looked so happy, so certain. Then I saw Collins, just where he said he'd be. Last row, aisle seat. Our eyes met for just a second as I walked past. That one look nearly stopped me in my tracks. I made it to the altar somehow, took Taylor's hands in mine, smiled at him through my veil. The minister began speaking about love and commitment and honesty, and each word felt like an accusation. When it came time for our vows, Taylor went first. His voice was steady, his eyes never leaving mine, as he promised to love me forever, to be faithful, to stand by me through everything life threw at us. I could feel Collins watching us. Then it was my turn. I'd memorized my vows, but suddenly I couldn't remember a single word. I fumbled with the paper in my bouquet, hands trembling. Susan, I began, my voice barely audible. Take you, Taylor. I got through it somehow, eyes fixed on Taylor, but aware of Collins with every fiber of my being. When the minister asked if anyone knew of any reason why we shouldn't be married, there was a terrible silence. I couldn't breathe, couldn't look anywhere but at Taylor's smiling face. Collins remained silent, but when I chanced a quick glance, his eyes said everything his mouth didn't. Taylor kissed me after we were pronounced husband and wife. The crowd applauded. I smiled for the photos, signed the marriage certificate with a hand that wouldn't stop trembling. Somehow, I'd done it. I was married now. To Taylor, not to Collins. The cocktail hour before the reception was torture. I stayed glued to Taylor's side, smiling until my face hurt, accepting congratulations from relatives and friends, all while strategically moving through the room to avoid wherever Collins was standing. It didn't work for long. Taylor got pulled into a conversation with his former medical school professors, and I slipped away to find the ladies' room. Collins was waiting in the hallway. "Congratulations," he said, his voice tight. "You look beautiful." "Thank you for coming," I said formally, like he was just another guest. "It means a lot to Taylor to have all his family here." Collins laughed bitterly. "Is that what we're doing? Pretending? What else can we do now?" I hissed, checking to make sure no one was nearby. "I'm married, Collins. It's done." "It doesn't have to be," he said, stepping closer. I could smell his cologne, the same one that used to linger on my clothes after we'd been together. "We can't," I cut him off. "Please, just let me try to make this work. Let me try to be happy with him." "Are you?" he asked. "Happy?" Before I could answer, my sister rounded the corner. "There you are. They're about to introduce you and Taylor at the reception." Collins stepped back quickly. My sister looked between us, her expression unreadable. "I was just congratulating the beautiful bride," Collins said smoothly, raising the champagne glass I hadn't even noticed he was holding. "To your happiness, Susan." He drained the glass in one go. It wasn't his first of the evening, I could tell. Not by a long shot. Throughout dinner, I kept finding him at the bar, getting another drink, his eyes never leaving the head table where Taylor and I sat. With each champagne toast, each well-wishing speech from our friends and family, Collins seemed to grow more tense, more agitated. Taylor leaned over during the best man's speech, his lips brushing my ear. "Have I told you how lucky I feel today?" I smiled and squeezed his hand, ignoring the way Collins was staring at us from across the room, another full champagne flute in his hand. The DJ announced it was time for our first dance. Taylor led me to the floor, wrapped his arms around me, and swayed to the song we'd chosen months ago. I rested my head on his shoulder, unable to look at his face, feeling Collins' eyes on us the entire time. "I love you," Taylor whispered against my hair. Over his shoulder, I saw Collins set down his empty glass and walk deliberately toward the small stage where the DJ had set up. My stomach dropped. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. Our first dance ended, and everyone applauded. Taylor kissed me softly before we returned to our seats for the father-daughter dance. I was watching my dad approach when I heard feedback from the microphone. I turned to see Collins standing at the DJ booth, microphone in hand. "I'd like to make a toast," he said, his words slightly slurred. The room quieted, people turning in their seats to look at him. He wasn't scheduled to give a speech. This wasn't part of the plan. "To Taylor and Susan," he began, raising his glass. "My cousin and his beautiful bride." The pause before beautiful bride made my heart stop. I gripped the edge of the table. Taylor smiled beside me, oblivious to my panic. "I've known Taylor my whole life," Collins continued. "He's the best man I know, honest, loyal, everything I'm not." People chuckled uncomfortably. I caught Taylor's mother's confused expression from the table next to ours. "He deserves a wife who loves him completely," Collins said, his eyes finding mine across the room. "A wife who isn't sleeping with his cousin." The room went deadly silent. My champagne glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. Everyone turned to stare at me, then back at Collins, then at Taylor. "What did you just say?" Taylor stood slowly beside me. "I'm sorry, man," Collins said, his voice breaking. "I can't watch you marry her when we both know who she really loves. It's been going on for over a year. I've tried to end it. We both have. But I can't let you start a marriage based on lies." Taylor turned to me, his face transforming from confusion to understanding, to pain so raw it physically hurt to look at him. "Susan?" Just my name, a question that contained everything. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My silence was all the confirmation he needed. What happened next was chaos. Taylor's mother was suddenly between us, her arm around her son, her eyes shooting daggers at me. Taylor's father was moving toward Collins, who still stood with the microphone. Guests were whispering, some already gathering their purses and keys, eager to escape the unfolding disaster. "Get out," Taylor said quietly, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Both of you." My sister appeared at my side, gripping my elbow. "Come on," she whispered urgently. "Now." She pulled me toward a side room, the small office where I'd gotten ready earlier. Behind us, I could hear raised voices. Taylor's father confronting Collins. The DJ awkwardly asking everyone to please remain seated. The growing volume of shocked conversations. My sister closed the door behind us, muffling the sounds of my wedding reception imploding. "What have you done?" she asked, her face pale. Before I could answer, the door opened. Taylor stood there, his jaw clenched so tight I could see a muscle jumping in his cheek. "Leave us alone," he told my sister. She hesitated, looking at me. I nodded slightly, and she slipped past Taylor out the door. He closed it quietly. Somehow that was worse than if he'd slammed it, and turned to face me. "How long?" he asked. I stared at the floor, at my white satin shoes peeking out from under my dress. The dress I'd spent months choosing. "About a year," I whispered. "A year," he repeated. "Were you with him the night I proposed?" I shook my head. We. I tried to end it then. I wanted to make things work with you. But you didn't end it. Not a question. "I tried," I said weakly. "Were you with him last week, when you said you were at your bachelorette party?" I couldn't answer. My silence told him everything. "Jesus Christ, Susan!" He ran his hands through his hair, messing up the careful styling. "In our bed?" "No," I said quickly. "Never there. I wouldn't." "You wouldn't?" His laugh was hollow. "Please tell me where you draw the line. I'm fascinated." I had no defense. Nothing I could say would make this better, would undo what I'd done. "Why?" he finally asked, and the genuine confusion in his voice broke something inside me. "If you loved him, why marry me?" "I do love you," I said, tears finally spilling over. "I just..." "Don't." He cut me off. "Don't you dare say you love me." We stood in silence for what felt like eternity. Outside, I could hear the muffled sounds of our wedding reception falling apart. Raised voices, the DJ trying to restore order, car engines starting as guests fled the scene. "Did you love him?" Taylor finally asked, his voice so quiet I barely heard him. I looked up at him, this man I'd spent 6 years with, who'd just pledged his life to me less than 2 hours ago. His eyes were red-rimmed but dry, his face a mask of control that I knew hid unimaginable pain. "Yes," I admitted, the weight of a year of lies finally crushing me. "I think I do." He nodded once, as if I'd confirmed something he already knew. "I want you gone by tomorrow, from the apartment, from my life." "Taylor, please!" "We're done, Susan. I'll contact a lawyer about annulment options on Monday." He turned to leave, then paused with his hand on the doorknob. Without looking back at me, he said, "I hope he was worth it." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in my wedding dress, surrounded by the wreckage of what should have been the happiest day of our lives. My sister drove me to a hotel that night, I sat in the passenger seat still wearing my wedding dress, too numb to even change. She checked me in under her name to avoid questions, helped me out of my dress, and asked if I wanted her to stay. No, I told her. I need to be alone. After she left, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at my phone. Notifications kept coming in. Missed calls from my parents, texts from bridesmaids asking what happened, messages from relatives who'd traveled for the wedding. I turned it off without responding to any of them. I barely slept. When morning came, I turned my phone back on to face the aftermath. 67 missed calls, over 100 text messages. Some concerned, some angry, some just confused. Nothing from Taylor. There was one voicemail from Collins. "Susan, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. Call me when you can." I didn't call him. I couldn't face anyone yet, especially not him. I extended my stay at the hotel for another night, ordered room service I couldn't eat, and tried to figure out what to do next. By the second day, I knew I had to go back to the apartment to get my things. My sister offered to go for me, but this was my mess. I needed to face it. When I got there, Taylor was home. I hadn't expected that, thought he'd be at work or staying with a friend. He was in the bedroom, methodically packing my clothes into suitcases. "I was going to drop these off with your sister," he said, without looking up when I walked in. His voice was flat, emotionless. "I can do it," I said quietly. "I'm sorry you had to." "Don't." He finally looked at me, and the emptiness in his eyes was worse than anger would have been. "Just take your stuff and go." I nodded and started gathering my toiletries from the bathroom. We moved around each other in silence, this choreographed dance of dismantling our life together. Occasionally, our hands would brush as we reached for something, and he'd pull back like my touch burned him. "The lawyer says we can file for an annulment since the marriage was never consummated," he said, as I was zipping up the last suitcase. "Fraud or misrepresentation are the grounds. Seems fitting." I nodded, unable to argue with his assessment. "I already told the hospital I'm not taking the honeymoon time off," he continued in that same detached voice. "You should still go. The tickets are in your name too." "I can't take our honeymoon alone," I said, horrified at the thought. He shrugged. "Do whatever you want. You always have." As I was about to leave, suitcases packed and by the door, he asked the question I'd been dreading. "Were you ever going to tell me, or were you just going to keep seeing him after we were married?" I wanted to lie, to give him some comfort, but I owed him the truth. "I don't know. I kept telling myself it would end, but it never did," he finished for me. "Get out, Susan. I can't look at you anymore." I left the keys on the counter and walked out of what should have been our first home as a married couple. The ripple effects spread quickly. Taylor's family, who had practically adopted me over the years, cut all contact. My relationship with my own parents became strained. They were devastated by what I'd done, embarrassed to face friends who had attended the wedding. "How could you do this?" my mother asked during one painful phone call. "To Taylor? To yourself?" I had no good answer. Then came the biggest shock. 3 days after the wedding, I finally called Collins. I thought naively that we would now begin our life together openly, that all the pain would somehow be worth it. "We need to talk," I told him. "In person." We met at a coffee shop far from our usual places, where no one would recognize us. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I was drunk. I shouldn't have done it like that." "But you don't regret telling him?" I asked. He looked down at his coffee. "I don't know what I feel anymore." That's when I realized the awful truth. Collins had wanted me when I was forbidden, when I was someone else's. Now that I was available, now that there was nothing standing between us, he was pulling away. "You don't want to be with me," I said slowly, "now that it's not a secret anymore." "It's not that simple," he said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Everything's so messy now. Taylor's my family. He'll never speak to me again. My parents are furious. It's just a lot." "A lot," I repeated. You told my husband about us at our wedding reception, but now it's a lot? I need some time, he said, to figure things out. I left without finishing my coffee. He texted a few times over the next couple of weeks, each message more distant than the last. Eventually, they stopped completely. The irony was crushing. I had lost everything: my husband, my home, my relationship with my in-laws, the respect of my family and friends, for a relationship that couldn't survive in the daylight. I had traded a man who loved me completely for one who only wanted me when I belonged to someone else. The next few months were the darkest of my life. I moved into a small studio apartment across town, took a leave of absence from work, and basically disappeared from social media. I couldn't bear to see the wedding photos that some guests had posted before everything fell apart, or the pitying messages from acquaintances fishing for gossip. At first, I couldn't accept how bad things really were. I kept thinking this was all just a terrible mistake that would somehow fix itself. It'll blow over, I told myself. People have affairs all the time. Life will go back to normal. But there was no going back to normal after what happened. When denial faded, anger took its place. I was furious with Collins, not for loving me, but for choosing that moment, our wedding reception, to expose everything. He could have told Taylor privately. He could have confronted me before the wedding. He could have done literally anything other than what he did. "You ruined my life," I texted him during one particularly low night. "You could have just walked away." "You ruined your own life," he replied. "I just exposed the truth you were too cowardly to admit." He was right, which only made me angrier. After anger came the bargaining phase. I called Taylor repeatedly, leaving voicemails that started apologetic and ended desperate. "Please just talk to me," I begged. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking for. I need to explain. "What we had was real," I insisted. "We can work through this." "I'll do anything," I promised. "Counseling, whatever you want." He never called back. Eventually, his number was disconnected. The only response I got was through his lawyer. Divorce papers delivered to my new address. Not an annulment, after all. A divorce, with a note saying he didn't want to drag this out in court, arguing about fraud. He just wanted it over. I signed them the same day they arrived and sent them back. Depression hit me hard after that. I barely left my apartment, stopped answering calls, even from my sister, lost 15 pounds because I couldn't bring myself to eat. The shame was overwhelming, like this physical weight pressing down on me every moment of every day. Most of my friends disappeared. Not dramatically, they just stopped reaching out, stopped inviting me to things. I didn't blame them. I was a reminder that relationships can implode, that people aren't always who you think they are. No one wants that kind of reminder in their life. A few stuck around, though. My college roommate Lisa started coming over once a week with takeout, not asking questions, just sitting with me while we watched mindless TV. My coworker Michael checked in regularly, eventually convincing me to come back to work part-time. Small kindnesses that felt enormous in my isolation. My sister was my biggest support. She didn't excuse what I'd done, but she didn't abandon me either. "You did a terrible thing," she told me bluntly, "but you're not a terrible person. There's a difference." She was the one who finally convinced me to try therapy. And thank God she did, because those sessions became my lifeline. Twice a week, I sat across from Dr. Chen as she helped me unpack not just what had happened, but why. Why I sought attention outside my relationship instead of addressing problems directly. Why I was drawn to the excitement of something forbidden. Why I kept lying even when I knew I was hurting everyone involved, including myself. "Shame keeps us stuck," she told me. "Accountability helps us move forward." Slowly, painfully, I began to accept responsibility for what I'd done. Not just the affair, but the lies, the manipulation, the selfishness it took to maintain it. I had to face the person I had become, someone who valued excitement over integrity, who could hurt people she claimed to love. I had to acknowledge that I wasn't the victim in this story. I was the villain. That realization was actually the beginning of healing. Once I stopped making excuses and truly owned what I'd done, I could start to understand why I'd done it and how to never become that person again. I found unexpected support in an online forum for people who had cheated and were trying to rebuild their lives. Not to justify what we'd done, but to learn from it. To find a way forward when you've been the cause of so much pain. Some of these strangers understood parts of my experience better than anyone in my real life could. "You can't undo what you did," one woman wrote to me, "but you can become someone who would never do it again." That became my goal. Not forgiveness. I didn't deserve that yet, but transformation. I wanted to become someone with integrity, someone who faced problems head-on instead of escaping into fantasy, someone who valued truth over comfort. It was the hardest work I've ever done, sitting with those uncomfortable truths about myself. There were nights I couldn't sleep, replaying moments when I could have made different choices. Mornings when shame would hit me so hard I could barely breathe. Days when I questioned if I deserved any kind of happiness after what I'd done. But gradually, day by day, I started to change. Not just my actions, but the way I thought about relationships, about honesty, about what love actually means beyond the excitement and passion. It's been 3 years since my wedding day disaster, and I've learned some hard truths that I wish I'd understood before I hurt so many people. The first thing I realized is that the most damaging part of an affair isn't the physical betrayal. It's the deception, the lies you tell, the person you become when you're constantly hiding, constantly covering your tracks. Each lie requires another lie to support it, until you're living in this elaborate house of cards that eventually has to fall. I thought what Collins and I had was this great, passionate love story. But looking back, I see that what felt like passion was really just intensity. The sneaking around, the risk of getting caught, the forbidden nature of it all, that creates an artificial high that feels like deep connection but isn't. Real love doesn't need secrecy to feel exciting. That excitement fades, by the way. It always does. But broken trust? That lasts. The people I hurt will carry those scars forever. Taylor may never fully trust a partner again because of what I did. His family lost a nephew and cousin they loved. My family lost relationships with people they'd come to care about. The damage ripples outward in ways I never considered when I was in the middle of the affair. If I could go back and give myself advice, I'd say this. If your relationship has problems, and all relationships do, address them directly. Have the uncomfortable conversations. Do the hard work together. Or leave, cleanly and honestly, before you betray someone's trust. Because once you cross that line, there's no going back. Looking back, I can see the red flags that I completely missed or chose to ignore. I mistook intensity and chemistry for love, when really, what Collins and I had was just the thrill of the taboo. I used him to avoid having difficult conversations with Taylor about our relationship problems. Instead of saying, "I'm feeling neglected," or "I'm not sure this is working anymore," I found someone who made me feel good without having to do any of that emotional heavy lifting. I also underestimated how addictive secrecy can be. There's a rush that comes with getting away with something forbidden. Your brain starts craving that excitement, that danger. It clouds your judgment completely. I made decisions while in that fog that the real me, the me with integrity and compassion, would never have made. One of the hardest parts of this journey has been figuring out who I am outside of relationships. For so long, I defined myself as Taylor's girlfriend, then fiancé, then wife, and simultaneously as Colin's secret lover. When both those identities were gone, I had to face the scary question, who am I, just as myself? I had to rebuild my values from the ground up. Honesty, integrity, accountability. These weren't just abstract concepts anymore. They became my lifeline. I had to practice them in small ways every day. Telling the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. Keeping promises, even tiny ones. Taking responsibility for my actions without making excuses. The most painful realization was that my affair with Collins wasn't some epic romance that went wrong. It was a desperate attempt to escape the discomfort of my own life choices. I was unhappy in my relationship with Taylor, but too afraid to either fix it or end it. I was unfulfilled in other areas of my life, my career, my friendships, and instead of addressing those issues, I created this exciting distraction. Infidelity wasn't a love story gone wrong. It was a way to avoid feeling the hard feelings, having the hard conversations, making the hard choices. It was emotional cowardice disguised as passion, and recognizing that truth about myself was both devastating and ultimately freeing. You're probably wondering where everyone is now. Taylor finished his residency and moved across the country. From what I've heard through mutual friends, he's dating someone new, a fellow doctor. I hope he's happy. He deserves that after what I put him through. Colin's moved away too, back to his hometown in another state. We haven't spoken since about 6 months after the wedding. Last I saw on social media, he's working as a photographer for a travel magazine. Sometimes I wonder if he thinks about what happened, if he regrets his part in it like I do mine. As for me, I'm still in the same city, still working in marketing, though at a different company. I've dated a little, but I'm in no rush. I needed time to become someone who deserves a healthy relationship before seeking one out. I still go to therapy, though not as often. Some days are harder than others. The anniversary of what should have been my wedding day is always rough. Sometimes I still wake up with that heavy weight of shame. But mostly, I've found a way forward, one day at a time. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive myself for what I did. Maybe that's okay. Maybe that lingering regret is what keeps me honest, what reminds me of the person I never want to be again. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that no feeling, no matter how powerful, no matter how intoxicating, is worth sacrificing your integrity and causing others pain. The temporary high of forbidden romance led to years of consequences that I'm still dealing with today. I'm sharing this story not because I'm proud of it, but because maybe it can help someone else who's standing at that crossroads where I once stood. Maybe you're in a relationship that's struggling, and you've met someone who makes you feel alive again. Maybe you're telling yourself it's just harmless flirting, just emotional support. If that's you, I'm begging you to pause and really think about what you're risking. Have the difficult conversations with your partner instead. Go to counseling. Or make the clean break and end things honestly before starting something new. The path I chose might seem exciting at first, but I promise you, it leads nowhere good. For those of you who've made mistakes like mine, who've hurt people you care about, who are carrying that heavy weight of knowing you've caused pain, there is a way forward. It's not easy. It involves facing the worst parts of yourself. But transformation is possible. You can become someone you're proud to be, even after doing things you're deeply ashamed of. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Not about me or my specific situation, but about your own experiences with boundaries in relationships. How do you maintain them? How have you rebuilt your life after making devastating mistakes? What helped you find your way back to integrity? Thank you for listening to my story. For those who have judged me harshly throughout this video, I understand. I've judged myself just as harshly, but I hope that regardless of what you think of me, you'll take this message to heart. Choose honesty, even when it's difficult. Choose integrity, even when temptation is strong. The momentary discomfort of truth is nothing compared to the lasting pain of betrayal.